Hello, Marty Braden here. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're new to my channel, let me briefly explain what I'm trying to do here on my channel. I wrote a book titled An Atheist Delusion, a Latter-day Saints Perspective on Richard Dawkins' anti-theist, Antichrist book, The God Delusion. In it, I give my perspective as a Latter-day Saint on all the arguments Richard Dawkins gives to support his belief that God doesn't exist. This channel came about when I had the idea of recording short 15-minute videos on each of the 10 chapters in Dawkins' book that he breaks down and has many subtitles, or what's called topics that covers in each of those 10 chapters. So that's going to be exciting. My last video was part 27, where I reviewed chapter 1, titled A Deeply Religious Non-Believer, which was basically an exercise in how God is defined. It's taken me 72 pages of introduction to kind of lay the groundwork properly so you know me and what I'm about, so there's no question. So when I go in, you have a better understanding of my perspective. But that's where we're at. We got to it, our first chapter, and did the first subtitle within that chapter. So let's go ahead, and I welcome you again. Let's go ahead and jump off and get on to where I left off last time. Here we go. Undeserved respect is the second subtitle or topic in this particular first chapter of Dawkins' book. As we saw from our review over the first subtitle, Deserved Respect, Richard says, quote, he knows that what he said will probably offend those theists who actually read his book, and that they'll feel he does not give their opposing views the respect they deserve. Duh. Richard also goes on to give an explanation as to why he chooses to hit religion so hard. Here's what he says, and I quote, the respect extended to religion and conversation on religion by all societies is undeserved, he says. And goes on, the assumption that religious faith is especially vulnerable to offense, the holy dissed by the unholy, and therefore it should be protected by what he calls an abnormal wall of respect, is undeserved, end quote. In my mind, showing respect to others' faith is just people being good and respectful to each other in terms of what they hold sacred. It's the live and let live kind of kindness that is being extended to believers. At least that's how I approach it. On the other hand, Richard feels that religion, like any other social experience, should absolutely be opened up to criticism because it most definitely has its faults. Even if everybody thinks that faith and their particular teachings are holy topics and should be untouchable. I agree with Richard that religion should be open to criticism and debate. That's no question. That's a given. But not uncivil criticism and disrespectful, contentious debate. To me, it sounds like Richard is just whining about religion as a whole. And that'll show up as we go through this entire book. And so I simply and in jest would ask Richard if he serves wine with his cheese. That's just an old thing I heard a long time ago. It makes me laugh. Challenging religious ideas and setting them up for open debate is what Richard Dawkins has spent his entire adult life doing. And I am just fine with that. Like I said, I don't object to Richard expressing his criticism of religion and doggedly going after any specific faith for that matter, even mine. That's okay. However, I don't believe in being unkind and uncivil in expressing one's criticism, which seems to be Richard's chosen forte. Here are just a couple examples of Richard's criticism of religion, which proves my point. Richard says, being a conscientious objector, for example, because of one's religious belief, as well as an ethnic cleansing or religious cleansing, are both targets for criticism. Other targeted views are topics such as sexual or reproductive morals, end quote. Richard asks, why does our society beat a path to those individuals who have such religious views as though they had some expertise comparable to that of a moral philosopher, a family lawyer, or a doctor? Sounds a little uppity to me. Seems to be the privileging of religion, he calls it. Society's exaggerated respect for religion is often under the guise of freedom of religion. What is so special about religion that we grant it such uniquely privileged respect? End quote. My answer to Richard's last question is that all mankind is born with and has the light of Christ within them. This conscience or sense of right and wrong that burns within our hearts, such as that we know and therefore acknowledge this source of our sense of what is good and right and wrong, is in fact what's worthy of reverence. That's what's worthy of reverence. that beautiful, incredible light of truth, light of Christ. It's this feeling of reverence for this source of what's right and wrong within each of us, including atheists, that's carried over to religion itself. That said, I don't have any qualms with Richard's attitude where he says there is no reason why these ideas shouldn't be as open to debate as any other idea, except that we have agreed somehow between us that they shouldn't be. That's not true, but that's how he views it. Even though I agree that it should be discussed and even debated, I must say that pointing out that religion shouldn't be getting the world's respect like it seems to be getting, in Richard's mind, once again doesn't add one iota of evidence for or against the reality of God's existence. Again, like before, it just seems to me that Richard is ranting about anything and everything related to religion in general, due to the angst he has against all religion in general. We'll be talking about where I believe that angst developed and was born from. So, Richard, I suggest you follow the advice found in the movie Frozen and just let it go, let it go. Anyhow, in doing so, I think you would enjoy happiness in greater frequency. I also think the fact that most people who have left a faith that they once espoused and respond to their faith crisis by turning to hateful rhetoric against the faith continually reveals they still harbor a thorn in their paw, so to speak, which they cannot remove for themselves, and therefore they continue to lash out to any and everyone who might try to remove that darn thorn that's hurting them. Many of these disenchanted believers soon find themselves lashing out against every facet of faith in God itself. Richard is just one example of many that could put forth that confirms my observation. Their modus operandi is to mock and deride any and all believers of their lost faith. And like I said, that thorn in that paw, oh, it hurts. And they can't get that thorn out that's sunk so deep. They need help with that. And when that thorn's gone, all that, I believe, goes away. That said, it is my belief that the debate between atheism and theism, no matter how much one believes in their side's view, should always be done with a great deal of curiosity, holding yourself out there. Why did I say that? Why do I believe that? Why do I feel that? Curiosity, compassion, and civility. And without demeaning any believer or non-believer simply because their views differ from your own view. So again, Richard, come on, man. Let's keep the verbal hits above the belt, shall we? Anyway, let's go ahead now and move on to Chapter 2, the God Hypothesis. We're going to get into it. That's going to be fun. Those subtitles are incredibly interesting. I look forward. Share your thoughts on these first two little subtitles in this first chapter. I'd love to hear your comments. Ask me what questions you have. Make a comment if you disagree. I'd love to read it. But until then, I wish you all continued success. Goodbye.